Well, it's Friday. Better than it being Friday, it's Friday the 13th. Can you believe that? Friday the 13th. So anyway, if you're planning on doing anything super dangerous today, go ahead and do it because superstitions are just that. But still, it is Friday the 13th. I don't know where the time went. All of a sudden, you know that thing when the seasons change and you kind of edge into it, and then at a certain point, it's like the light changes, flicks over. And that's what we've hit in the past couple of weeks. It's funny, I don't remember summer ending because we had all those fires and it just glazed over an entire season. Fall did not happen here. Okay. Mail call. I have questions. Tim Lara, I have one suggestion for selling your work slots, which would be to have a lottery system where you have a waiting list that people can sign up for. Then when a slot comes up, you can draw a random name for the list and give that person, say, 48 hours to purchase the slot. Otherwise, it goes to the next random person selected and so on. Not sure if the juice is worth the squeeze. I've never heard that phrase before. That's very cute. Not sure if the juice is worth the squeeze as it would take more of your limited time, but I do find to be one of the more fair ways of doling out things in short supply. In my personal experience, I missed out on a lot of first come, first served type things because I'm often stuck in a meeting for work or something like that when the notification goes out. By the time I'm free, I've missed the chance. What? It's Mr. Milo. It's a good idea, and certainly one that I considered having a random number generator to kind of just to make it even. I mean, because that'd be nice. Because what I'm thinking about now is just like saying on a Friday, hey, Monday at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, I'm gonna have 10 slots. Whoever gets there first gets there. But that could screw over people who weren't there. It's a good idea. Because I want this to be fair. I just don't want to have to pick and choose, and I can't take all the jobs. I simply can't. Somebody on an Instagram post of mine says, I have a watch coming up that's going to be due for service. I'm going to be looking elsewhere for service because I posted some vaguely political thing, and I'm like, I didn't even want to talk to the guy or even engage with him. There's no point. But all I thought was, buddy, I'm sorry to say that, I wish him the best of luck. But I don't think I'm going to have a shortage of people who want to send their watches in. But I hope whoever he finds to service his watch does a great job. Okay, well, if I can find a number generator, that would be better, because then you can have a sign-up list. But then how many slots do you have? Okay, you have 10 slots, but how many for each? Like 10 of 10? 10 per? So that would be 10 times, that would be 100 different people in theory. I mean, I guess I could slot them up. I mean, there would be maybe 2 random things where you're selected into group 1 of 10, and then there's the drawing. I don't know. If it's short, if it doesn't add a ton of extra time for me and it's fair, I think it's a good idea. I just don't want to pick and choose and make people feel that they've lost out. Lane Edwards. Oh, Lane, your 7/8 is done. That custom 7/8 you had me build. I do have some bracelets for you to look at. I'll make a separate little video so you don't have to comb through this, but remind me. Lane Edwards. Hey, Spencer and Invisible Sabrina. Well, she's right up there. Just wondering if you had an update on your rubber strap collaboration. I would really like to find one for the 6309 you did for me. Thanks, and I hope all is awesome. No, nothing came of it. The only reason being is that I simply couldn't. The gentleman who did the work, who wanted to collaborate with me, he was very gung-ho and extremely patient. And I don't know, sometimes I have ADHD. And it's one of the things that makes me avoidant sometimes when it comes to certain projects. Certain things is just much harder to deal with. And I couldn't. He was extremely competent and focused, and he he presented me with a ton of options and a lot of communication and all this kind of stuff. And frankly, it was just overwhelming. And it just turned into this blur. So, I mean, Sabrina was talking about, having something to do with that. But the gentleman did a lot of, very good work, Mr. Jones, Corey Jones. And I feel badly that I have not followed up with him because he has the two straps. I actually sent them to him. So, maybe someday if I ever get my brain straightened out, we can get this done. I'd love to have it done. Keith Donnelly, thank you for finding time to do mail call. After naming the Chiclet bracelet, what will you come up with for that unnamed one? The bracelet he's talking about is the bracelet, the original correct bracelet for the 6139 601X. Here is just a close look at that bracelet. Isn't it pretty? Note the squared ends here and the round ones there. Beautifully done. And here is, for those of you who are curious, this is the Chiclet. These were made by Stellux. You can tell because the links are thicker. All that and it's marked Stellux, but links are thicker. It's got the flat style clasp. It doesn't have the two little fingers over it. This is more standard Seiko, and it's got the standard style clip. Anyway. Boy, is that pretty, huh? 6010, 6012, 6015, 6017, I think. I don't ever think there was a 6019. But, the funny thing about the Chiclet bracelet is that I got it, well, hang on one second. Okay, time for a little show and tell. The Chiclet bracelet. I find that the best names, the best things, the best sort of inspirations come when you're looking the other way. The Chiclet bracelet I named probably over 10 years ago. I bought a watch on eBay because in those days this stuff wasn't really looked at, but I bought a watch on eBay and it looked good to me. And it arrived and I was standing in the kitchen. I'd unloaded it and I was kind of looking at it. I was talking to Sabrina at the same time, who's working on dinner. And I looked at it and that's the first thing. It reminded me of that Chiclet gum. That's what the links looked like to me. So I just kind of called it that. And because it was apt and because it was fitting, it stuck. If you get the right name for something, it has power. So this, I happened to look at it and just Chiclet just came out of my head. If I sit down, but I look at this bracelet and it doesn't say anything to me. And I've looked at these bracelets for a long time and no name has ever popped out that I can ever think of. I think for the time being, it's simply going to be that bracelet that goes on a 6139 6010. That isn't the train track, the non-train track, the other one. Anyway, but this is the very watch. That's the one. Would you believe it? I've never serviced this watch. This was the first one. And when this showed up, this was long enough ago that a lot of the collectors over here were not aware that these ever came on this style Stellux Chiclet bracelet. It hadn't been seen before. Those catalogs hadn't been scanned yet. And so people were like, what the hell is that? Where'd you find that? It came right off of eBay. And, but there it is. I've never serviced it. I've never touched it. I think in part because, I don't know, there's something, how many of these are left that are as they were when they came out of the factory, never touched, never opened. Also, I hate to admit it, but the Chiclet bracelet, there's something about it that it doesn't work for me with this. And I'm not going to take it off. And so I don't have any driving need to redo this. It's cool. It's certainly cool, but it just, I don't know. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. Lucky Gold Panda. I hope you see this question in time for next mail call. I've been thinking about flyback chronographs. I understand that starting, stopping, and resetting the chronograph puts a certain amount of stress on the movement, I think. My question is, does using the flyback feature put more stress on the system than stopping the chrono and resetting it? Oh, yes. Does using the flyback at 30 seconds elapsed time create the same amount of stress as pressing the flyback at 3 hours elapsed time? Hopefully that makes sense. All best to you and Sabrina, and all best to you. When you hit a flyback, now for those of you who aren't aware, you have a couple different kinds of chronographs. You have, you have a chronograph like this one. There it is, it's running. This chronograph, you stop it, and that's when you can reset it. If it's running, you cannot reset it. It won't let you. A flyback, if it's running, you can reset it right then. So you have like, I guess you can time lapse or something else like this. But what you're doing is you're forcing when I stop this watch right here and I hit click, you have the operating levers come in, and then the clutch plates are separated, so that the main pinion, the main shaft that is on the sweep hand, underneath the sweep hand here, that is free to rotate independently of the fourth wheel section, which is in the middle. A flyback chronograph doesn't do that. You hit a reset and it just goes crank, and it resets it, which means you have those plates are touching, and there you go, as far as I understand it. What? I know, it's true. So it's going to put stress on the wheel, but they have stronger clutches. They have big 6-finger clutches instead of the sort of internested C things that one does. Resetting from the bottom of the dial, so it has further to travel, it's definitely going to put more pressure on. I mean, everything's about leverage, right? Everything's about leverage. So when you reset, you have a heart wheel. And the heart wheel to reset, with the hand going straight up, is going to be on the base of this. That's where the hammer comes in on this. So if it's down all the way, if the point is down, you hit the reset, it's gonna really slide. Whap! It's one of the reasons why I like to do resets when you only have a few seconds left and you're not really hitting it. Just the less stress we can put into a thing that... What? He's sitting there going like this. I know, I see you. Patrick O. Hi, Spencer. Thank you for the informative video. You're welcome. I have 2 questions. Is the Seiko 7T62 quartz movement serviceable? Oh, well, anything's serviceable. Sure, of course. However, it's always a matter of diminishing returns. What's a better use for your time? Rebuilding a plastic movement that you can't get spare parts for anymore, or simply finding another 7T62 and popping that movement in. I'm a big believer in if you can avoid unnecessary labor for something like that, do it. Secondly, have you serviced a Seiko 8L35? If so, what are your thoughts? Well, I mean, I serviced my own Marine Master. I think very early this year, maybe late last year. I was surprised how, I was expecting like if you look in the back of like an Omega, coaxial, something like that, they're just this exquisite piece of art. Seiko has had a decades-long history of making pretty workmanlike movements. They aren't designed to be super flashy with crazy finishing and extraneous stuff. So it was very clear in its lineage from the from Daini 7000 series stuff. I mean, it wasn't identical to that, but you could definitely see it. I expected maybe a little fancier, but beyond that, it was the same thing. You just service the darn thing. Honestly, it was harder to figure out how to deal with the way the crystal cartridge works on those, in that you don't pull out the crystal by itself. The crystal is already in basically a screw and holder, and that screw and holder, that gets screwed into the case. What? I know. You sure do, Mr. Milo, Mr. Fuzzy. Anyway, they're good movements. They're fine movements, and they need to be serviced, and people should not be afraid of servicing them. They don't require anything crazy and special. Rick, I'm curious about Spencer's answer. This is Rick is answering the previous person asking about the 7T62. I'm curious about Spencer's answer, but I have one of these, and as far as I can tell, this is a newer chronograph movement with plastic train wheels, so no jewels or lube. I also know for certain there's no trimmer and no way of adjusting the chiming. Mine runs slow and I just have to live with it. These movements are pretty cheap and plentiful. Also sold as Epson YM62. So if it's ever a problem, most likely the most reasonable fix would be to replace it. That's the world that we live in. And yes, Rick, you're correct. There's no trimmer. There's no way to change that. Like, you know, I reflect on that reading these questions. I just did an Arnie. I just rebuilt it for somebody. And I went through it and I put it on the time graph or on the fabulous QT99, and I was able to get it to, I think it was hovering around 5/100ths of a second per day accuracy, losing. So it's ever so slightly slow, but man, that was the tightest I could get it. You just have to live with these other movements. 7T, it is what it is. Next question. Someone named Nurk. I love that Omega. Is this the blue Jedi? I forgot wrist check. No, it's not the blue Jedi, but I need to do wrist check. Whew. It is time for wrist check. Okay, I'm still wearing this. God, isn't that a pretty watch? And this strap, Marcello Dietrich sent this to me. Dude, are you sure you can spare it? This is a nice strap. Are you sure you don't want this back? It looks like you pulled it off one of your own watches. It's a very nice strap, but if you want it back, please let me know. I feel guilty taking something with nothing in return. Isn't that pretty, though? No, this is not the Jedi. The Jedi is different in that it has, I think, a dark blue dial and a big square TV case. That really is a pretty movement. So anyway, the blue Jedi, I think it's people call it that because of the combination of orange and all this other kind of stuff. I don't know. I've never followed up on it. You know, it's funny. I've been a Star Wars fan since I saw the first movie in the theaters in 1977, but I've never really considered myself a Star Warsy, like a Warsian or whatever they call themselves. Joseph Stewart. Hi, Spencer. Do you have much experience with the Seiko G757? Never even seen one. Never had one in. Never personally touched one, not once. My late father's G757, for those of you who don't know, the G757 is a James Bond watch. I think it's also a Metal Gear Solid watch, too. But it has sort of this blackish horseshoe-like thing on it. My late father's G757 4050 is in my possession. It's one of my most prized possessions. As a kid growing up idolizing my dad, I'd look at his watch on a red nylon Velcro strap and think there was nothing cooler. It's just so bloody cool. I know that a variant of the model has a Bond watch in Octopussy, but to me it was my dad's. According to my mum, he had a friend buy it for him duty-free in Singapore in 1982 on the way home to Australia. Currently, the LCD screen is not displaying anything, but the backlight comes on when you push the button, so the battery is still good. I know that a lot of these watches died a horrible death due to battery leaks. I've also heard the circuitry is a bit tricky to work on. Cheers from Australia, Joe. Okay, so you've got power. You've got a light. But you're not seeing anything in the screen. Nothing. Is the screen clear? Like, can you see the mirror in the back of it? I mean, in the sense of, does the display look stained or mottled? Or does it have, like, weird sort of rainbowy rings on it? Any of that stuff? Or is it literally just clear and there's just nothing showing? So those are a few questions that if you have time to look at it, please do. Look inside the back. Check it out. If it had a battery leak, you will know. Battery leaks, it'll smell acrid. It'll have sort of bluish, greenish, crystalline, powdery dust junk everywhere. The stainless will be stained. So look at those things. If you open up the back, and it looks clean. Like, it looks like the metal looks nice and shiny, and there's no like damage or those white crystals underneath like the battery or anything else like that, then it might, I mean, the power's not getting to the circuit. I'd have to see it. I don't really claim to be like real big on doing the LCDs because they can be extremely challenging. But I mean, I do a fair amount of work on them, and I've brought a fair enough back, but I wouldn't call myself an expert. But if you can answer those questions, that'd be fine. Tom N. Spencer, thanks for keeping up with the weeklies. I try. What am I going to do? I was hopeful today that Sabrina I might be able to sort of jolly her along to join up, but she's got other things she wants to do, and she's deeply annoyed about some other stuff unrelated to this, and so she's just focusing on schoolwork and the kids and stuff. Today, the school district just announced that they're abandoning their hybrid plan where kids were like going to school physically like 3 times a week, but in staggered shifts. And then the other times they're remote learning. COVID cases are rising so quickly that they just said screw it, and so everybody's home now, and they're changing the education stuff, and she's up there working on it now. Anyway, the sunburst blue dial on that 6139 is gorgeous. This is the proof marked 6139 6015 with the 2-part early sweep. Yeah, it's beautiful. Seiko, man, they did a lot of beautiful dials, but their blue dials are just, they really put their back into it. I wonder why. I know you've shared your belief in not polishing cases, yet I'll make another pitch. I'm somewhat skillful in restoring some of the things between the crystal and case back. Come on, Tom. I would not say, I have a long way to go everywhere. I would never say that I am so skillful restoring all the stuff. I thank you for the support, but I don't know that it's warranted. Why not educate yourself on doing the polishing correctly? With your can-do attitude and skills, it would be a snap. I think the biggest, I've read about it. I've read about, I'd love to have a jeweler's lathe. I'd love to have lapping machines, machining supplies. I think that would be fantastic. And if I could figure out how to do it right, I'd love to. The reason I don't do it is that I don't know how to do it right, and it hasn't been a priority for me. But I mean, if I had a lapping machine, I mean, I could repair this damaged corner on this Omega. That'd be awesome. But I don't know. I'll consider it. Pie in the sky probably for me, but I mean, it'd be nice to be able to do stuff. I taught myself other things. Let's see. Maybe offer polishing as an add-on to the standard service. Well, if I could do it, if I could guarantee to myself and to the customer that I could produce a product worth owning, then sure. I'm not going to do crappy work and charge people for it. That's just silly. Not that you were suggesting that. As much as I love my rough and tumble cases, to see a vintage Seiko as it looked from the factory is a thing of beauty. I pay extra for that. For me, clean, polished sections with the case lines still intact and the brushing mostly intact, if not fully intact. That's kind of where it's at. I don't really like beat up watches, and it always makes me sad when you see a really beat up Seiko, because a lot of its beauty was in its freshness, and that's gone, of course. But I don't know, until I could do it really well. If I could do it really well, then absolutely. But it's nothing I've even thought about now. Solbrook. Things you don't want to hear your doctor say. I've never seen that before. Things you don't want to hear your watchmaker say. Let me get a hammer. Come on, Saul. I was going for the hammer for 6139. I wasn't picking up a hammer. Slapshot Regatta. Thank you so much for your response to my question. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Well, you're very welcome. I was actually going to send my watch to Seiko for an assessment, but now no way. This gentleman has a 7828, I believe, or 7838. In reality, the movement itself does not need servicing. It's working great. There you go. I just really wanted to do a waterproof test and get the crown and some of the pushers replaced if possible. Do you work on 7838 movements as well? I mean, doing a case rebuild on one of those isn't hard. I think the most challenging thing on doing a 7A chronograph case rebuild is that the bezels are held in place with a quite soft white nylon gasket, which of course has been long discontinued. So you often have to reuse the original, but if you're not careful, it's real easy to jack up. That's the most annoying thing. The buttons, those are little button seals, that's fine. It's ditto for the crown, simple to do, not hard. But those, the bezels have a white nylon gasket. The crystals typically have a black nylon gasket. And again, you can't, there may be generics out there, but I've never found them that have worked. So that's the biggest thing. I would suggest more than worrying about getting a waterproof test, because you don't want a 7A going near water, near water. It's one of the few things that will kill a 7A dead, just like that. It'll kill it dead. I would keep that thing as far away from water as absolutely possible. Even if you get all new seals into it and make it all nice and clean, that's really for dust exclusion and to keep the internal atmosphere consistent. You don't ever want to put those seals to the test in the water. Never do it, because if water gets in, you are screwed. Trust me, I've seen more times than I can even count the heinous damage that water will do to a 7A. As for working on 7A38, sure. They're 7A38, 7A28, 7A38, 7A48, and there's a couple other minor variants. The only difference is in the calendar side. The heart of the movement is all the same. 7A38 has added day date. 7A48 has moon phase. Other than that, they're all the same. DMITS 22. Sears used to sell that tradition watch with the Valjoux quite inexpensively. It kills me. God, I wish I'd bought one. What a beautiful watch, too. I should have bought one of those, but I already had a bunch of 6138 and 6139s at the time. I was mostly trying to keep up with all the Bulova Accutron and AccuQuartz models I wanted then. The problem I had when I became aware, so for those of you who didn't watch last week, okay, you have the Seiko 6139 like this, right? Imagine this color scheme and the way the case is done with this kind of curve on it, just like this. The Sears tradition chronograph, it looked like this, like it had the Pepsi bezel and everything, but it didn't have a Seiko underneath it. It's Seiko movement. So they got a Valjoux 7750. So imagine a chunkier version of this, but with multiple sub-registers and a day and date. But it looked like this. The reason I didn't think too much about them is I'd run across a number of like Sears watches previously, some of the true vintage tradition models, and they were by and large junk. And so I assumed this also was junk. And I only learned later that it was not. And now they're hard to find. Super cool. I have cat hair in my nose. Jim Canataro. Regarding Seiko crystals, I've tried to install new crystals in 6309s and 7548s, and I've had difficulty getting the crystal retaining ring to snap into place. Have you ever had this issue? Oh, yes. Any suggestions for me? Well, if you look at the video I made about putting this watch together, I mean, you see me put the crystal in live, and you can see me deal with that. Basically, whenever anybody writes and says, hey, I'm having trouble getting this crystal to drop in, I can't get it to drop in, the crystal retaining ring, the bezel won't drop on, won't click into place. I always say you've got to make sure that there's no part of the crystal gasket that's getting caught and pushed down, so it's coming in underneath the crystal, because it's going to hold the crystal up, and then you just can't compress it enough to get that ring to snap into place. It might take a few times. I mean, when I did this one, I think it was 5 times for me to get that crystal gasket to sit correctly and to get the crystal sat down properly. That ring should not fight you. It should go click. Pardon me. The only exception I can think of to it being a crystal/gasket problem, many years ago I had an Arnie And the Arnie had case damage, and it also had damage to the inside of the bezel, the crystal ring. And as a result, because they're basically interlocking, like the case goes click like this, right? So you've got this bump, and they go boink, and they click like that. Well, they were worn away. So you could go, and it would sort of go mushy, and it would go blah, and then it would pop right back off again, because it was also warped. Very rare for that to happen, but it does happen. 999 times out of 1,000, it's going to be that the crystal wasn't seated correctly. Watch talk. Great video, Spencer. Thank you. You're welcome. About 2 months ago, I bought one of those NOS bracelets just in case, and bam, a really nice 6139 6012 came up for sale without the original bracelet. Man, it makes the watch pop. That's the thing about Seiko so much, is they designed their watches, not just the watch head, it was everything. It was the watch head and the bracelet. They were meant to go together. So it's like it has this kind of like, you can see where the lugs are, you can see where the end links are, but at the same time, the watch has sort of a feeling of completeness with those lugs being filled. It just, you gotta have the right bracelet. There's only a few exceptions I could think of where Seiko did not. Seiko's bracelet choice was less than ideal, but only for me. On another subject, it is now November 2020. And who would have ever thought? But I just purchased a 6139 6032 speed timer with this very watch serial of this restoration video, 144590. Isn't that cool? So he's saying this gentleman bought a watch, a vintage watch, and he found that the watch had come through here years ago. I haven't done a 6139 6030X speed timer for many years. Man, I'm very happy now. I thought the dial might be a reproduction because it's so clean and nice. Then I watched your video, noticed the serial number and the marks on the bezel. Came from the US and now it resides in Australia. That's great. I often wonder, really I do, I often wonder all the watches I've worked on. God, there's so many of them out there. And the vast majority now, they've been, bought and sold, especially the ones I did years ago. People aren't going to know that I did them. Not that that means anything one way or the other, but it's like my work and my legacy is floating out in the world. This is, I believe, the first time someone has bought a watch in the wild that turned out to be one that I serviced. Enjoy it. I'm glad it looks good. I'm glad it still looks good. I'm glad that loom still looks good and the dial still looks good. John Boy of Alaska, Mr. Boyarski. Spencer, thanks for showing the service guide. The prints in color are much nicer than various PDFs I can find online. I tell you, you get the original guide with its color, and it's so clear and you can really look at it. It's just nice. That said, I got the A306 back together using a print Seiko lubrication guide in Instinct. So I then went to work on a 7001 8009 white dial version. 7001 is a no date 8. It's just, I believe that's the case. They made versions of these movements that had no date 8. Wow, this 7001A is really simple. I can see why this was a calling card to the Swiss to up their game. Simple where it was needed, but still robust where needed, and innovative all the way around. They really rethought a watch movement in the winding drive wheel arrangements, tougher, thick mainsprings, and overall easier to produce parts. Compared to a no-date Swiss A-Shield or Bulova from the day, this would be a lot cheaper to produce and easier to service, with less chance for springs to fly away. It really is a generational difference from the 6000 series and well-rethought watch design. It's a snowy Monday, so I'll let you know how these come along as the week goes by. Tell Sabrina we all miss her in the videos. Believe me, I will. I have. I'm her husband. Why would she want to listen to me? And good luck with all the homeschooling and family stuff. I feel your frustrations. I don't want to communicate too many frustrations. Things are pretty generally okay. Yeah, man, but if you look at, like, I have a beautiful bull of a dress watch with an AC11 movement in it, and you look at them and they're clearly, they're not delicate, but they have many more components. The way they're built is not quite as robust. They tend to look a little more delicate and skeletal, even if they aren't. But man, you look at an equivalent year, just like you said, 7000 series 7005 or whatever, and they're so simple and strong. They don't have unnecessary finishings. They cut corners where there shouldn't have been a corner to be in the first place. They do very well, and those 7000 series movements are just bulletproof. They'll just run and run and run and run. They're low stress movements, and they just chug along. And they're a large part of the reason why Seiko had such a huge game changing influence on watch design. Yeah, I mean, like the magic lever. I mean, you look at like a Swiss automatic winding system. It's going to have all these multi-component pieces that themselves are made of multiple components, reversing wheels and all this stuff, and all these different things, and jewels and bushings, all of which can go bad. Whereas Seiko dispenses with all that stuff, and the whole thing is this paw lever. It looks like a fan with two little things coming off with hooks. And the thing is as it moves, no matter which way it moves, the tips will turn the reduction wheel, no matter which way it turns. And it's only a few components. Blair Watch Project. That's a very funny name, Dan. Regarding Seiko's automatic winding systems, do you lubricate the jewel in the winding pawl lever? Well, yeah, what you want to do, the big thing is you don't, and sorry, cat hair. Because Milo's sitting here yelling at me. What? The big thing is that you don't want to have lubrication from the pawl lever, from that jewel, get anywhere near the center wheel. And that's a real big deal for 6139s because there's a hole right there. And if you put in it, the guide specifically says do not lubricate on top of that pin. You want to get lubrication underneath, inside, basically. I usually actually lubricate the underneath of the oscillating framework with ball bearings, the winding bridge. And I make sure that basically I don't use a ton, and I don't loop. There, happy? So the big thing is don't lubricate on the exposed top of it, which would be the bottom on top of the movement, because then you can get a really heavy lubricant out of the winding assembly and get it onto the upper pinion of the fourth wheel, and then your clean movements can have the wrong viscosity lubrication in the wrong place, and you're going to start having all kinds of timekeeping issues, and just keep that away. One more from Jim Canataro. Do you lubricate the inside and outside of the crystal seal? Okay. Seiko's L gaskets. Literally, they're L gaskets like this. They go underneath and on the side, and the crystal drops in like this. Seiko's instructions specifically say you're supposed to lubricate a little bit on the outside. There's sort of like a double divot channel that runs all the way around the outside. They say that they want it lubricated on the outside, just a hair. Some people are like, no, don't ever do crystal gaskets. Don't ever do it. I do, and I get just like the tiniest sheen of lubrication on the inside. Many people are like, no, don't do that. I think because if you aren't super careful, if you lube it up even more than just a tiniest amount, you can get silicone grease will start to come in on the edge of the crystal underneath, and it'll look terrible. So I do, but like a tiny amount. You just have to be very, very careful. They do want it on the outside. Again, not a lot, almost none. I mean, like, not like loose materials, not even to the point of it being like less is more. Teeny tiny amount. I'd rather take more time and having to redo putting the crystal in a bunch of times than grease the hell out of the seal so it drops in smoothly the first go. But I don't like putting them in dry. That is, I also don't think that that's helpful, and it becomes really hard to put in a crystal that way, and you can damage the original Viton crystal gasket. That's my take on it. Anyway, it is Friday the 13th. Those are all the questions. I don't think there's really much else going on. It's Friday, it's pizza day. Milo's licking himself. That's important. Not much else to say. Windy, cold. I don't think I missed it. I think this season is over for working on the MG. I mean, I got some work done, but Sebastian is just so small, I can't do it because he wants to be on top of whatever it is I'm doing, and I'm always extremely concerned that at his age he's going to end up getting injured, and so we'll see how he does. Next year he'll be 5, and we'll try it again next year when the weather's nice. Other than that, hey folks, have a good weekend. Mandalorian is on tonight. That's episode 2, season 2. So that's a good thing to think about watching. The only other thing is I've been listening to a lot of Nick Drake. And it is really, for me, it's really fantastic, really amazing stuff. So right now, the song that's driving me crazy from Nick Drake is his song Road. It's about 2 minutes long. But listen to it with headphones if you have the urge to. It's just, to me, it's just exquisite. It's just exquisite. So anyway, a lot of Nick Drake. You guys have a good weekend. Bye. Oh, and Lane, I'll make that video for you now. When I'm done, I'll go over there and make that bracelet video.